Hey everyone, Matt here. One of the best ways to learn a synthesizer is to investigate the presets that come with it. After all, the sound designers making these patches have not only tried to make them sound good and be musically useful, but they are also making an effort to utilize the most important features that are unique to that instrument. In this dissection, we will be looking at Form's long beat patch and learning how easily Form can take the most basic audio recordings and turn them into creative musical expressions. This patch is a great example because it massively combines 4 different sub-presets in the performance slots, and then transforms them with some simple modulation courtesy of the motion curve. Let's check it out. I've got Form loaded up inside of MASCHINE, and this preset immediately inspired a musical idea for me. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to show it off, is that this is a very kind of simple patch. There's definitely more complex things that we could discuss with Form, but I love that the simplicity of this will hopefully give you creative ideas on how to kind of manipulate Form into doing interesting things for your own musical journey. So, Form is located in the library under Synth Miscellaneous, Melodic Sequences, Monophonic. You can simply load it up, and this is what it sounds like. I just created a simple 3-note melodic sequence. So the first thing you need to understand about Form is that it gets its sound generation from a sample or a WAV file, audio file, whatever you like. And to hear what the original file is, you want to come to Sample Select and preview it. So I don't know about you, but that's kind of a generic, bland, boring sound. In fact, to me it sounds like an aluminum water bottle, which I just happen to have, and you kind of just tap the top of it, and you can kind of get a similar sound. So right away, it should inspire you. You can go ahead and record just anything you want inside of your studio, and throw it, you just drag it right into here, and it becomes your sound source inside of Form. So that's the first thing you really have to understand, that what we're looking at here is that just simple audio file. To understand why it's more complex in what it's doing, we're going to look at multi-mode and the performance slots. Before we get into multi-mode, it's obvious that the effects in this patch are having a huge influence over the sound. And anytime you're doing a dissection where you want to strip down and understand what's happening with a patch, it's best to usually turn the effects off. So you can hear right now and see lots of reverb, ambience, and delay, some EQing, some saturation. So we can go ahead and turn off all the effects right here at the top. And instantly, you can kind of hear that original sample again and kind of get a sense of what it's doing, and really it's kind of decoding the mystery of this altogether. Now, the reason I did it here from the global is because, again, we are in multi-mode, and this patch is using 4 separate presets of this sound, each with their own different effect settings. So if I wanted to turn off all the effects per preset, it would have been just a lot of nonsense when you can have this nice global feature right here at the top. All right, so in multi-mode, we have 4 sound slots happening here. If I take this out and put it on single mode, we'll be able to isolate each one once at a time. So let's listen to the first one. Did you hear that? Barely doing anything. In fact, it's just kind of hitting the transient, and it's re-triggering on every single note I press. So the reason we can't hear much is because the envelope, which is controlling the amplitude of the Form oscillator, is set to a very quick attack and then immediate decay. Now if we turn the effects back on, it's pronounced, a nice big hit like that. But if we wanted to actually kind of hear more what's happening here, we can just push the sustain up. Now you can see each transient striking rather than just the first initial one. So what we're looking at here is how the sample is being played back via the motion curve. And if we come to Curve Editor, you can exactly see what's happening with this sample. It's basically turned on its side, and the hit is going throughout in a 16th note pattern here. Each time just basically scrolling right through the waveform. Okay, so that's the first one. If we come to the second, let's get out of the curve editor here and let's play the second preset. You can see that this one is on a loop and set to going back and forth rather than just straight through from the beginning. It's also pitched a little bit different. So remember, each of these have completely separate settings. So this second slot is basically pitched differently, has some of the additive oscillator, which is essentially kind of either a sub bass. It can also be just a second oscillator tuned up. It can also influence how the FM is happening on here. And especially depending on the pitch. So this is using the reverse swells to kind of fill in that gap there. Okay, let's try the third one out and see what happens. Instantly we can see a lot more has changed right here. So using some of the oscillator effects, you can hear it's got a bit of a different timbre altogether, etc. And the fourth one, again, more of just kind of a percussive bed. Now let's go ahead and take that out of single and add them all back together. Remember, you can also do unison. So unison would be how many voices played per single performance slot. But multi-mode, we'll put them all together. The red one is essentially the first slot. And if you had like 8 of these set up, depending on where you set the red button is how it's going to influence the other ones. All right. So they're all playing back nice together. And with the effects on, you can hear how some of those different tuned elements kind of add to the nice kind of like percussive, kind of almost like a kick and a snare type of option here. And last but not least, I want to touch on the macros used in this preset. Form has 4 macros, and they can be assigned to a whole bunch of parameters inside of Form. For instance, like spectrum might be perfect for filter cutoff. So for instance, you can hover on any of the names of the parameters, click on them, and you'll see 3 manipulation slots for modulation. So the macros are controlled right up here, macro 1, 2, 3, and 4, as opposed to other things like envelopes, LFOs, key triggers, aftertouch, mod wheel, etc. So the macros are great because you can basically assign all sorts of controls and manipulate like this. So one of my favorites here is that it's using some subtle modulation on the movement parameter. So you can see as I move that curve back and forth, it is actually adjusting the speed of these different motion curves on each one of these. So it's kind of, things are going faster or slower depending on how you set it. And again, here, just sync speed and set it to a macro. You could even set this to an LFO to kind of just change in rhythm over time. Very inventive. And then lastly, one thing to always think about considering is that you're not set in stone using the preset's own wave files. You can swap these out for whatever you want and see kind of keep all the parameters the same, but just swap out the source content. So while we have something nice like that, I just recorded in a few terrible sound bites. Duh, boop, duh. So we could go ahead and just, even inside Maschine, just drag and drop the audio right in. Swap that out, load it up, and see what it sounds like. So really just have fun, experiment, and get into it and see what you can come up with for them. Thanks for watching.